joining us again. I'm talking to you today from a corner of my studio in the Bronx. I'm speaking with Rafael Moure-Punnett, who is the district manager of Bronx Community Board 6, facilitating the community board's role in representing the neighborhoods of Belmont, Tremont, and West Farms here in the Bronx. I live in West Farms, by the way. Rafael comes from a background in public service, previously working for the New York City Council in District 15 in the Bronx and the Harlem Community Justice Center. Rafael became interested in and involved in community issues as a student at Fordham University, also here in the Bronx, and he holds a master's in public administration from Baruch College. Rafael cares about housing issues in New York City, music mixing and mastering, and training his dog Pluto. I am on the community board as well for the past 7 years. I've actually been there longer than you have, but it's been really great working with you. You're very passionate about what you do, and it's obvious to us. And I know, speaking for myself and probably on behalf of the whole Community Board 6, we're very happy to have you. Keeping us on our toes and making sure that we're doing the work for the community. So thank you. And helping us along the way. We'll talk more about that later. Yeah. But can you tell us something about yourself? I kind of, you're like a young person, you've been working in community for a while and you are very passionate about it. And I wonder, like, how did you get into this? Like, do you have a family history in politics or what?
I mean, I think part of it is my upbringing, that my parents were both, very politically involved and shared a lot of, books and thoughts with me about kind of the way that the world works and society works. And then I think kind of primed me as a young person to kind of care about these things. And also, like, when I was first living in the Bronx, I kind of came across a city council campaign and got kind of involved in local government that way. And that was also kind of a very important kind of step in me getting involved in kind of what goes on in a neighborhood.
Right. I see Pluto.
Yes, he wants to join in.
So I know that you worked with Richie Torres when he was the city councilman, District 15. And what did you do with him?
I was doing constituent services. So, people know that when they have a problem with their life and it's related to government, they can call their city councilman. And a lot of that stuff that people would call about was related to housing. And so we started doing housing organizing because we would get so many complaints about repairs and evictions and people not being treated right by their landlords. And our office really started taking an active role in solving people's problems, and I learned a lot about kind of how the housing economy is and people's tenant rights. And also I got really involved in organizing people to advocate for themselves.
I don't know. I kind of have the sense that you are one of these people who, you're like, hey, let's organize and let's make something happen. Can you say something a little bit about that? Or just about, that kind of spirit of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky that when I was working there, I was working with people who had been professional tenant organizers. And a professional tenant organizer, often what they're doing is someone's complaining about an issue and they're saying to that person, are you interested in talking to your neighbors about this? And if you can find people that are interested in talking to their neighbors, you then have a leader that you can then use to give you, feet on the ground and support in going door to door in a building and organizing everyone in the building that has the same issues around, a common issue, a common problem.
So, are there any successful projects or initiatives that you worked on that you're proud of that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, after I worked for the city council, I worked for a nonprofit that was based in a housing court. And it was kind of in like a housing court that was set up as kind of like a pilot kind of project where in East Harlem, if you get sued by your landlord or you want to sue your landlord, you don't go to Manhattan Housing Court. You go to a local court in your neighborhood that has a much smaller jurisdiction, and there's a nonprofit there, or historically what had happened, there was a nonprofit there that was there to kind of help facilitate the court process. And that's what my job was. And we were able to really partner with the presiding judge in that courtroom to develop programs around how to help people in housing court and how to help move cases forward. It's a very kind of inefficient and lengthy process of suing someone in housing court. And so we were able to really kind of develop a model of how to provide social services in a courtroom setting in housing court and change some of the outcomes for people that otherwise would have kind of been kind of lost and
Right.
stuck in this beast of a system. And I think that was something that I was really proud of and kind of really opened my eyes to like, how can we do social justice from within the systems that are not oriented toward that goal.
And it really sounds, it doesn't sound very glamorous what you're talking about right now, but it is so important. It's housing court, it's like it's beyond stressful. And I'm sure that this initiative really helped many people. It may not be something that people are getting awards for or whatever, but this is the kind of thing that really is helpful to people. And I guess it's probably an easy way for you to start working as a district manager, because this is what you do at the community board. You help individuals and also the community board itself. But when people call the community board, the office, I guess people are calling about housing again, mostly about housing. And I think that's really the main thing these days, isn't it? Like the number one issue.
I mean, it's the kind of thing, I mean, people often know that they can call their community board about trash on the street or kind of quality of life things, noise. And those are the kind of things that we can resolve and talk to the city agencies that are responsible. But when someone says, my landlord is breaking the law and everyone else in the building also has the same problem, that's the kind of issue that you can organize around and ask the person, well, do you want to set up a meeting in your building and get everyone in the building involved? And if they say yes, then that's the kind of thing that you build community power around, beyond just I deal with you as the individual and try to help resolve your individual problem.
Yeah, and to that end, I will say that we did have a success with the Lambert houses and building helping them to form a tenant association, which they did do last month, which is really a pretty big deal. And I'm proud of having helped to do that. Obviously it's their tenant association and they have to deal with it, but the community board is there to help them. I like to tell my friends, hey, national politics, it's a big thing. It's a lot of parts and, hey, nobody's really asking us our opinion, but join your community board, and you really can have agency there. We really can make a difference. Can you say some more about that? I know that you probably encourage people to join community boards.
The community boards are kind of a unique system in New York City. And it's kind of unlike other places, I think kind of the thing that people that aren't from New York City can kind of draw a parallel to is like a local, like town council, right? Where people in a small locality have an opportunity to come express their opinions about local government.
Right.
And New York is such a big city and has so many different communities that it's kind of hard to get local representation because it's such a dense city. And so the community boards are kind of a unique thing where, each community district has a group of people that, unlike a small town council, aren't like elected. They're just people from the neighborhood that are appointed and volunteering and become the eyes and ears of that neighborhood. Each community board is kind of distinct and operates as its own agency, but it really becomes the front line for a neighborhood to express concerns around what's going on and advocate for itself with the elected officials and the city and the agencies that are supposed to be resolving the problems that happen in the neighborhood.
On our community board, and I'm sure on many of them, there are members that have been there for a long, long time, 20 years, 30 years, we're having term limits enacted now so that you can't stay there that long, which is probably a good thing. But there's also talk about getting rid of community boards altogether. Like what do you think that would look like if there weren't community boards?
I think because they're so ingrained in how the city operates, I'm not particularly worried about someone abolishing the community boards. Um, I do think that term limits are going to be a very interesting change to the community boards. They'll take effect in 2028. And basically, um, all the veteran board members that have been there since 2020 will be out. And it will, I think, cause a big loss of kind of the institutional knowledge that happens in a community board. When you're on a community board for, 10 years, you get a perspective on what goes on in the neighborhood at kind of a larger scale than the elected officials get, because elected officials in the city council are all term limited to 8 years. And so you kind of start seeing them come and go, and you start getting this kind of context of what are the real trends in this neighborhood around, development, especially like housing and land use and rezonings. And the community board is going to kind of lose the institutional knowledge of what has happened in this neighborhood. It's going to be new people who don't have that historical context. And it's really going to be up to the district manager to be, the context of, well, this is what happened 10 years ago. This is what the neighborhood looked like 15 years ago. And this is how we've gotten to
Is
where
it
we
a
are
done
now.
deal? Is that a done deal, these term limits?
Yeah, it was approved in a referendum that New York City voters voted on.
Right, I remember that.
I think the charter revisions people vote on without really
Yeah.
understanding. I think even the
Mhm.
most recent one, it was very complicated, and I didn't even have a grasp on exactly what was in the charter revision until
Right.
it was right before it happened. And I think in paper it sounds good. Oh yeah, we should have term limits so that more people can kind of get on their local community board. But a community board doesn't have a lot of like hard power. We can't like prevent things from happening if we don't like them. It's more about our soft power of, well, we're against it, so we're gonna get information and we're gonna lobby the politicians and we're gonna call the news and we're gonna kind of do those things that are not powers laid out for us in the charter, but are kind of our role as a community organizing, office. More people will kind of get a perspective on that by joining their local board, but it won't have that same historical perspective. And in neighborhoods that are gentrifying, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic also. And I've talked to like the district manager of Bushwick, and there's a divide between the old members and the new members. And the old members are like, these new members are gentrifiers and they don't have the interest of the neighborhood at heart. And, they feel nervous about handing the reins over to the new group.
Do you have any advice for people and groups trying to work with the government in the city? Just like any kind of general advice. Do you think that it's good if there's anything that you really need to know to come to your community board first of all, or maybe talk to your city councilman? Like, what do people do?
I think often, in New York City, people know they can go to the community board to kind of engage on a local issue. It's just kind of it's hard to tell until you go what reception you're going to get. And I'd say in general, community boards, if you can, you show up to a committee meeting, you want to talk about a health and human services problem, and you go to the health and human services committee of your local board, the board members are going to care about what you're talking about and want to support you. And I think often it's very helpful to go to the local board to get, support and knowledge about who else to talk to in your neighborhood that cares about this kind of thing, because the community boards become this kind of like resource directory on, if you care about ABC issue, this is who you should talk to in the neighborhood that's also involved in that kind of thing.
So I know that the application for community boards in New York City is getting ready to open, right?
It's open in all the boroughs except the Bronx, I think.
It's open right now in all the
Yeah.
boroughs of the Bronx.
Yeah.
And how long does that stay open anyway, that application?
It depends on which borough you live in. Most boroughs, it's open like January to March.
Okay. So I will definitely put a link in the description below for people to join their local community boards. And I thought there were community boards throughout the country. Is that not right? Is that they're not in every city?
No, I think it's a unique thing to New York City, and the equivalent's kind of like town council
Right, right.
that happens in small towns in America is similar in that you get people from a neighborhood talking about a local zoning issue, but
Mhm.
the members of the board, the members of the council are elected and salaried, and there's their job, and the public is there to lobby them, but it's not like the members are the same kind of mix of people that are in a neighborhood. And that's what's unique about the community boards is the people there are volunteers. They do it because they care and they really reflect the neighborhood.
Mm.
It's not based on, who has the money to run for office.
Right. Yeah, that is very unique and special. And as a member of the board myself, I know that it is just the regular people, my neighbors, and it's just the regular people. And it really is very important. And I also encourage people to join the board. It's not so hard to join. And if you have ideas and you have passions that you would like to, things that you want to see happen, you can make them happen. You really can. And your district manager can help. So, once again, I'll put the description, a link in the description for joining community boards here in the city. And as we wrap up, Raphael, I can, obviously you love New York. I can see that. What's the best thing about New York, in your opinion?
I mean, I think the people in New York City are really what makes it. And New York is such an interesting place because you can meet all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life.
Mm.
And because it's the kind of place that people come to from all over the world, you get a very kind of interesting perspective into the different corners of the world and the different cultures of the world all in one place.
Right.
And that makes for a very kind of interesting dynamic. And you can kind of be a tourist in your own city and explore different corners of New York for your entire life and never get to see the whole thing. So it's a place that you can really explore with no end,
100%. I know. I've talked to you about this before. You don't have any plans to run for city government, do you? No, never.
I mean, I think what was interesting for me was working for an elected official. You see how much it consumes your life and how much of it is based around fundraising. And I mean, like that's part of the challenge of politics in America is in order to run for office and maintain your office, you have to fundraise.
Right.
And that isn't particularly appealing to me. And I think it's kind of something that people talk a lot about is like, is this something that we can change in federal politics in
Yeah.
particular? Because it really changes what the job is if a lot of the job is fundraising.
Right. Now, do you think that there's room for that to change the dynamic of how people are elected in this country? I mean, it seems sort of like, can we like give $2 on our tax return? I think that'll like probably cover everybody's campaign in the whole country forever. I mean, why can't we do these simple things? Well, I guess I kind of know why, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think once the corporations of America get entrenched into the political system, it's kind of hard to pull them out of it. I
Hmm.
mean, New York City has a very interesting system for local elections where we have matching funds. If you can raise $100 from people in your district, the
Right.
city will give you $800,
Mhm.
8 to 1. And that's the kind of thing that really allows local people from a neighborhood to run for office. And if they can get people in that neighborhood to support them, they can raise enough money to compete with someone that has,
Yeah.
corporate power behind them. In theory, we could do something like that on a federal level. The problem is that the corporations have unlimited money, and so you'd also,
Right.
I think, have to limit how much corporations can contribute, and we've kind of removed all of those limits on the federal level.
Yeah, yeah, it is true that here in New York, I see that there are quite a few people who just sort of, came up from maybe you say nothing, and they have been able to, be city council people, senators, and what have you, through the matching grant
Yes.
program. So that is something that's good. Okay, well, you don't want to run for anything, but if you were the mayor, what would you do? What would be the first thing you would do for the people of the city if you were mayor?
I mean, I mean, the mayor's an interesting job because you're managing, tens of thousands of employees, right? And the thing that New York City spends the most money on is the Department of Education, right?
Really?
And and it's the biggest agency. And if you look at many of the low-income neighborhoods in the city and much of the Bronx, the schools are doing very poorly. And like students aren't achieving grade level reading and math,
Mhm.
despite this being the most expensive thing that our city tax dollars go to. And there's a lot of theories around why that is, and a lot of, you know, industry that has been developed around charter schools and educational consultants that are all trying to solve this problem of how do you help kids in low-income neighborhoods do well in school? And we haven't solved it yet. I think that is kind of one of the major challenges that I would try to address as a mayor is looking at like, you know, what are the what can we do to help kids perform better in school? There are schools in our district in Community Board 6 where 20% of the kids can read at grade level, right? Um,
Uh,
and I think a lot of that is like kids don't have the support at home to be able to be prepared to kind of be in that classroom and get to that kind of grade level. And that's because, you know, their parents are working and not home and, you know, their parents didn't go to college and there are all these different kind of like things in your home life that affect how well you can do in school. And I think if we can incorporate more of those support services at school, we can help try to bridge the gap of the kids that have the support they need to be ready to go to school and perform at grade level and the kids that have things holding them back. And I think there have been some examples, like there's a community school model where there's a dentist office and a doctor's office in the school. And there's, you know, everyone has access to the after school programs. And there's all
right.
these other things we can do to kind of like help support people in their lives and in taking care of their kids so that their kids, when they walk into the classroom, are ready to learn and aren't worried about what's going on at home or so stressed out about what's going on at home that they're not ready to learn. So I think that's kind of one is Department of Education, you know. Two is NYPD. I mean, and this is really how many people view their interaction with government is how the cops treat them. And, you know, we saw this with Mayor de Blasio, that he kind of came in saying, I'm going to reform how the NYPD interacts with New Yorkers. And the NYPD really, you know, extorted him and said, you know, you're not going to do that. We're not going to allow you to do that. And he folded immediately. Um, and you know, with our current mayor, that's not obviously not a priority of his. You know, his attitude is back the police no matter what they do. So I think that's another big opportunity to kind of change how New Yorkers perceive the government is making the NYPD accountable to the public. And I think in many ways they don't feel accountable to the public. When city council tries to regulate them, when city council tries to make them, you know, limit the overtime and kind of force them to report on what they do, the NYPD says, we're not doing that and you can't make us. And I think that's really the responsibility of the mayor is to say, like, you know, what can we do to rein in an agency that refuses to be accountable to anyone? You know?
Yeah, I think you would do pretty well, Raphael. Those were two good ones right there.
Yeah, and I think also like with matching funds, like and with getting involved in the mayor's race, like, you know, you can volunteer for someone for free and knock on doors for them and make phone calls for them. It doesn't cost money to get involved if you see a candidate that you really believe in and you think will change things for the better.
You know, I'd like to see more leaders, you know, more really good leaders. And, you know, to your point about the youth, you know, where are these leaders coming from, right? They start as children, you know, and yeah, we need to cultivate that. We really do. And I didn't realize that the DOE was the biggest you know, line item here in the city. That's interesting because it's really underperforming. So what does that say about us? You know, what are we doing?
And you know, in New York City, teenagers can join their community boards. So if someone has an interest in getting an idea of what's going on in their neighborhood and how to get involved, you can show up to a community board. That's, you know, that's every meeting is public. You can just show up and find out what's going on. And you can obviously join if you really want to get knee deep into it. And it's an opportunity, I think, for young people to get a better understanding of how local government works and what they can do to get involved. And that's a big opportunity if I was a teenager and I wanted to be mayor of New York one day, that would be the easiest thing to do is just start showing up to community board meetings, join the
Right. And
community board.
what's the age? What's the age?
16.
16. Okay, that's good to know.
And
So,
there, and I think at the when the age was initially lowered, we got some teenagers on community board 6,
right,
and since they left them, they haven't had it any since. And
right.
I think it's kind of a challenge as to like how do we get teenagers thinking about this as a resume booster because You know, if I wanted to go major in political science, this would be the best opportunity to kind of get a hands-on view of what to do. Is I joined my community board. I really saw the nitty-gritty of how things get done on the local level. That essay is going to write itself, you know, when you're applying for college.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you, Raphael. Thank you very much for talking with me. You know, we have a lot of work to do here at Community Board 6, and it has actually been pretty enjoyable working with you, you know, and as a volunteer, as you know, but we're all volunteers in our community boards. It is, and I've heard some, you know, a couple of horror stories here and there. It really is good to have a district manager that really does care and kind of holds us accountable to the thing we volunteered for, and making us do stuff for the community, and we can see things happening. We can see the initiatives that we've started and the projects and the different things that we've been making noise about. We can see change happening, and it feels great. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.